I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is More Than Blockchain. And on this episode, we're going to touch upon one super simple question, and I'm going to do my best to answer it. Now, this is the question I'm most often asked, whether it's professionally or just in my personal life. Because professionally now, I work from 9 to 5 in Bitcoin, and in my personal life, I stand on roofs and talk about Bitcoin as I am doing right now, and that's my 5 to 9. And that super simple question is, what is Bitcoin? And so to best explain this to you, I'm going to explain this to you as though I were explaining it to your grandmother in an elevator, and I have about 30 seconds, okay? So my goal here is to give you an explanation of Bitcoin that ideally you can share with your friend, that family member, that colleague that's kind of dubious, saying, okay, but why should I care about this? Why do we think that this is such a novel technology? So we'll see how I do based on the amount of shares that it gets. So here we go. I'm in the elevator with your grandmother, and she's like, hey, I hear you work in Bitcoin. What is it? This is what I would say. I would say, Grandma, do you remember the time before the internet? You know, in the 70s and the early 80s. How did we exchange value? How did we do that? And she may even harken back to a time before we had credit cards, where we just had checks. And even before we had checks, when we just literally had cash. And even back to even gold, if Grandma really wants to get OG. And so she would say, yeah, we used to use checks, or we would, we can still use cash today. That still works. And it would sometimes be a belabored process. And I would basically say what the internet did for the flow of information, Bitcoin is going to do for the flow of capital and the flow of money around the world. And I would say, Grandma, since we live in such a globalized society, I think it would be great for me to be able to send value across borders without having to deal with the current banking system, currency exchange rates, and all of the things that one has to deal with when they're exchanging value across borders. So I'd say, Grandma, imagine what the internet did for the flow of information and how we communicate. Bitcoin is going to do that, and it is doing that for the flow of value globally. And that is why it's such a novel technology. Because as globalization continues to connect all the corners of the earth with one another, it would be a much better thing for commerce, for overall travel, for people's well-being, for remittances, for getting paid, just in general, if we were all using Bitcoin. So one day, Grandma, maybe we'll all be using Bitcoin just like right now. Aren't we all using the internet? Isn't that how you talk to your grandkids and how you talk to your son, who I know from high school, making this up as I go, but wouldn't that be how you talk to your grandson and how you talk to your son through your iPad? The internet was to information what Bitcoin is going to be to value exchange globally and to the way that we understand money. That is what I would say to your grandmother if I were with her in an elevator for, 30 to 60 seconds. And maybe that was a little bit longer, but that is the way I feel about Bitcoin. And as someone who lives between Colombia and the United States, I am constantly trapped in this, how do I exchange value? Because it's not always easy. I am actually someone that's unbanked in Colombia. I can't actually open a Colombian bank account, and that causes me a lot of problems where I know that Bitcoin would be an amazing solution, and to be fair, is an amazing solution. So I hope that this helped. Please go ahead and share this explanation with your friend, family member, or colleague who's maybe on the fence about why Bitcoin is so important. And I think using the idea of the internet, which is another global network where we can all connect to and anyone can connect to. It's a permissionless network. You don't need permission to connect to it. That's basically what Bitcoin's going to do for money. And I think it's a really salient example. And to know that today, as I stand here on this roof in 2024, there's only a couple 100 million people that are kind of into Bitcoin or into the Bitcoin network, and knowing that around 5 billion of the 8 billion people on planet Earth have some type of access daily to the internet, Bitcoin has a long way to go in its adoption, but as more and more people see it as the future of global value and exchange, that's a permissionless network similar to the internet that anyone can join, Bitcoin will hopefully take hold. So as I said, please go ahead and share this with your friend, family member, or colleague who's maybe on the fence. And as always, please follow us on social media at More Than Blockchain. And no matter where you're listening to the podcast, whether you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple or Amazon Music or any podcast platform, or you're watching me on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe. Thanks again for checking out this episode of More Than Blockchain, and I'll see you next time.